Have you ever been in a position where you prayed and prayed, but it felt like God wasn't listening? This is the story of Hannah, a woman who understands your struggles, your tears, and your faith like no one else. Stick around, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you approach prayer and perseverance. Our story takes place in ancient Israel, in a time when having children was considered both a blessing from God and a cornerstone of a woman's identity. Hannah, the wife of Elkanah, longed for a child, but found herself unable to conceive. Her grief weighed her down year after year as the sting of barrenness persisted. To make matters even harder, Elkanah had another wife named Peninnah, who had children and did not hesitate to remind Hannah of her misfortune. Peninnah provoked her relentlessly, taunting her over her inability to have a child. It wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. Every word from Peninnah was a dagger to Hannah's heart. Despite this, Elkanah loved Hannah deeply. He would offer her a double portion of the sacrifice each year, an outward sign of his affection. But as kind as Elkanah's gestures were, they didn't ease her pain. You see, Hannah's sorrow went deeper than any earthly comfort could reach. Have you ever felt like that? Like no matter how much someone loves you, they just can't fill that aching void in your soul? One year, after enduring another particularly agonizing session of Peninnah's torment during the family's trip to Shiloh for worship, Hannah had had enough. She went to the temple of the Lord and poured her heart out before God. She knelt in fervent prayer, so consumed by her pain that her lips moved, but no sound came out as she prayed. Her prayers were raw, unfiltered. She begged God for a son and made a vow. Lord Almighty God, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever touch his head. This vow was significant. It meant the child would be dedicated to God as a Nazirite, set apart from birth for his service. Now, as Hannah prayed silently, Eli, the priest, watched her from a distance. To him, her behavior seemed odd. Thinking she was drunk, he approached her and said, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." Imagine that. Here she was in the most vulnerable moment of her life, and even the priest misunderstood her intentions. But Hannah didn't let Eli's false accusation shake her. She respectfully corrected him, saying, "Not so, my lord. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." Eli, realizing his mistake, blessed her and said, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." Encouraged by this, Hannah left the temple, her spirit lifted. Notice this: nothing in her circumstances had changed at that moment, but her faith gave her peace. How often do we wait for a change in circumstances to feel peace, when God is offering us peace in the waiting? Not long after returning home, God remembered Hannah's prayer. She conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, which means heard by God, for she said, "Because I asked the Lord for him." True to her word, once Samuel was weaned, Hannah brought him to the temple at Shiloh to dedicate him to the Lord. She said to Eli, "I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." Can you imagine the depth of faith it takes to hand over to God the very thing you prayed so desperately for? But Hannah didn't stop there. She didn't wallow in sorrow or regret. She lifted her voice in a prayer of praise, celebrating God's faithfulness. Her prayer, recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 2, is a beautiful hymn that begins, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high." It continues to declare God's sovereignty and justice. It's a prayer that reminds us that even in giving, we are blessed. Over time, God blessed Hannah again, granting her more children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. But Samuel remained dedicated to God, growing up to become one of Israel's greatest prophets, a man who would anoint kings and guide the nation back to God's ways. Now, what can we take away from the story of Hannah? First, don't underestimate the power of heartfelt, persistent prayer. Hannah didn't hold back in her prayers. She brought her raw emotions and deep desires directly to God. How often do we tiptoe around our prayers, afraid to be honest with God? He already knows what's in our hearts. There's no need to sugarcoat it. Second, don't allow misunderstandings or harsh words to sway your faith. When Eli accused Hannah of being drunk, she could have been offended and walked away. Instead, she held her ground and kept her focus on God. Likewise, Peninnah's taunts could have driven Hannah to despair, but instead, they pushed her closer to God. Third, God's blessings may require our surrender. Hannah prayed for a son, but promised to give him back to God. She didn't cling to what God blessed her with. She trusted him enough to dedicate Samuel to his service. What are you holding on to that you need to surrender to God? Lastly, God's timing and blessings are perfect. Hannah waited years for a child, but God used that waiting to prepare her heart. And through her faith, her son Samuel played a pivotal role in the history of Israel. Sometimes our waiting isn't about God's inability to act. It's about his perfect plan unfolding in his perfect time. So, as you reflect on Hannah's story, think about your own prayers, your own struggles, and your own faith journey. Are you willing to pour out your soul to God, even when everyone else misunderstands? Are you ready to surrender the blessings you've been praying for, trusting that God's plans are far better than your own? Hannah's story reminds us that we serve a God who hears, who remembers, and who answers in ways beyond our imagination. Don't give up. Keep praying, keep trusting, and keep believing. Like Hannah, you may find that your greatest despair becomes the springboard for God's greatest blessing in your life.